Welcome. I'm Simon, a creative empowerment coach and strategy consultant, and also host of the Beyond Perception podcast, where we dive deep into the governing foundational principles of our shared reality to really uncover what's true and what isn't for your freedom, empowerment, and self-determination. Today, we're going to unravel the principles of homeopathy and separate fact from fiction regarding its effectiveness. And my guest today is Jonathan Damonte, a second-generation homeopath with almost 30 years of practice, who's also a Bowen Therapist, a teacher, and my neighbor here in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. And you bring a wealth of experience to this discussion. So welcome, Jonathan. It's my great joy to have you here.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone.
So what I would love to do with you to tackle the misconceptions surrounding homeopathy, from claims that it's pseudoscience or the assertion that it defies the laws of chemistry or physics or biology. And I thought it might be interesting to start with the concept of disease. And there's a study I bumped into in preparation for this conversation, which is under the name The Chronic Disease Explosion, and it suggests that only 4% of the population today is free of disease. And I would like to begin with the first question to you. Maybe looking from your eyes at the current global health situation, is it true that disease became the new norm?
Yeah, I think it's true. I think that's absolutely true. That people are not as healthy as they could be. And so-called medicine today is a big part of that cause. I have no doubt about that. In my own experience, in my own perception, that what are so-called health-related medications are actually underlying our illnesses and are delicate mechanisms of equilibrium to maintain our health are, in a sense, assaulted by pharmaceutical drugs. I can honestly say that to be true. Not only are we looking at the pharmaceutical effects, but we also have to look at the lifestyle. We also have to look at our environment. These are all big factors in the explosion of chronic disease. There's no one entity that is to blame. However, at the same time, you have to admit, we are, as humans, living longer. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that too. The age expectancy in certain populations, in certain regions of the world, is very high. So, it's a give and take. However, living with chronic disease is no fun. Absolutely no fun. And one of the biggest areas of chronic disease is autoimmune diseases. Now, is that a factor of living longer? Or is it a factor of deterioration at a rapid onset? You know, it's a hard question to answer. All I know is, as a practicing homeopath and a Bowen therapist, I'm always busy. But then so too are doctors. So medical doctors I'm talking about. You know, people are seeking answers to restore their health. We seek trainers to go to the gym, dietitians to clean up our diet. We seek specialists when we have a chronic illness, be it an inflammatory disease, be it a neurological disease. We're always seeking answers. If we have an arthritic hip, we replace it with a ceramic one. If we have a deep infection in our tooth, we replace it with a root canal and a crown. So there are many options for our healthcare. However, what is really health? Is it the freedom for the body to restore its own equilibrium and maintain balance? Or is it a question of needing to support our health with interventions of medication, whether they are natural or pharmaceutical.
I've written it down. The WHO defines health as the complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being. Is that, in principle, a possibility for everyone?
Well, have you experienced it for yourself? Yeah.
I could say I feel more healthy than a few years ago, definitely.
Okay.
But
Yeah. I mean, we're all gonna pass.
yeah,
And this vessel will take you to your destination right on time.
yeah,
However, it's a question of what is in the way of you enjoying this life. And if your ill health is a factor, then you really need to work on that. You could get by on feeling okay with an illness. You can. I remember before I studied homeopathy, I was a salesperson for a vitamin company and a homeopathics company. And I used to visit doctors, naturopaths, homeopaths, herbalists, and pharmacists. And I remember one pharmacist that he gave me the list of the medications that he took. And he was really like a walking ghost. And we had a frank discussion, and he said, I'm perfectly fine being functional. I get up in the morning, I can finish my day. And then I thought about that, and I realized, well, is being in the perfect physical form the necessary measure of being in health? He was quite happy and confident in his argument. Whether I believed it or not is irrelevant. But it begs the question, your version of health is different than your version, his version, their version. And so what is the definition of health? So for a homeopath, it's more important to look at what is disease than what is health. Because when you can define disease not as a diagnosed pathology, but as a measure or expression of the way you are out of balance, that expresses itself in symptoms that could be labeled a disease. So the question then comes, what is wrong and in the way of that body restoring its equilibrium and its health? That's what a homeopath intervenes with. Not to treat a disease like, Ramana was the perfect example. Your dog.
yeah.
You took him from the street. He had a really intense disease.
Yeah.
We want to talk about
Lots of parasites. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean a lot.
yeah, yeah.
And we tried with homeopathy to affect that. And as the weeks, we probably did it for a month, I would say in total, and we didn't succeed. It really needed a pharmacological effect. Now, the question, other homeopaths might say, well, you probably got the wrong remedy. Maybe. But right now, Ramana is a beautiful dog with a beautiful intestine free of parasites.
Yeah.
Because we used the medication. It was really necessary.
So what you're suggesting is
Yeah.
homeopathy is not a replacement for conventional approaches or modern day.
Not always. If
Medicine.
there is a disease that we gave it a good chance for homeopathy, there are many, many situations where homeopathy will work for parasites. And especially pinworms. Many kids get that. There's a very simple treatment with homeopathy. However, we did not succeed, and time was important. Why let him suffer and cause damage that may be irreversible when there's a perfectly good medication?
So would you then so what I'm understanding from what you're sharing with us, homeopathy is a methodology or a means to restore your own balance. And that might be what balance to me is different to what is balance to you. So there's a distinction individually.
For sure. And sometimes it won't work. That was the example of Ramana.
So is it that homeopathy is not a treatment for acute situations?
No,
Or?
not at all. It's just that he didn't respond to the remedies I gave.
Yeah.
And the practicality of his need was we needed to get rid of the worms. So it's not a dogma, homeopathy. It's a black and white science. It works or it doesn't. That's how we use it. So there are many ways to use homeopathy. There are those homeopaths that give one remedy at a time. In Europe, we call them unicist prescribers. They give one remedy at a time. And then there are the homeopaths who give a multiple of remedies in continuum, just like a drug. However, what all homeopaths should do and all doctors should do is measure the effect of every medicine that you give. The advantage of homeopathy, giving it one remedy at a time, is that you can tell if it's working or not. The symptoms will change. So how is that different than it's the way we use one remedy at a time. That's the difference. So, for example,
in terms to
if you clean
medicine or?
any medicine, so if you clean your floor, people like to use vinegar now, acetico, and then you clean it with vinegar, and then you clean it with bleach. Well, which was the real cleaner? Which one was better? Which one, and why did you do both? So that's the poor example or analogy for taking more than one medicine. If you're taking more than one medicine for a condition, they might be helpful. But how would you know which was which? And when would you know to stop the one that was helping after it had helped? So this gets very complex when people are taking multiple medications for multiple conditions. You know, in our culture, North America, Mexico is North America. The number of medications that people take is a long list. That's why I was right away denouncing pharmaceutical medicine, because it's not always fixing the problem. It's keeping a person at a level of function, not necessarily comfort, to maintain what is a definition of health, often defined by a blood work or other lab tests. Whereas a homeopath will use that information, but really it's about how well the body is surviving in the stressful situation that it is in. So chronic disease is almost like a stuck state of reaction to the disease, pathology, the stress, the social component, all of those three factors that you talked, the WHO talked about.
And so would you say then that homeopathy is a means to provide an outside impulse to kind of restart that innate ability to function well of our body, to
For sure.
facilitate inner balance?
That is the mechanism of action of a homeopathic remedy, is to initiate a change of behavior in the whole economy of the body. Mental, physical, and even emotional.
And
how?
Yeah, and from what I hear, this is a very different approach than conventional medicine.
Not really.
Not really. Because that's something that
conventional medicine uses homeopathy all the time. Nitroglycerin is used for angina pectoris, when you have shortness of breath because your arteries are occluded or closed. That's a homeopathic remedy, first and foremost. Now they're treating allergies. People with allergies to nuts or anything in food sources, they're treating it with microdoses. Oral therapy protocol, I forget, OTP is the abbreviation. It's homeopathy.
And could you define homeopathy? Like, what qualifies as homeopathy?
Homeopathy is when you use a substance to stimulate the body's natural immunity, natural vitality to heal itself. So you all know what the effect of 6 cups of coffee. You know what that feels like. I mean, maybe people who can't take coffee, they only need a half a coffee to really react. You know that's a nervous state that is forced on you. Well, imagine you had that state due to other factors. And you really were in that anxious, wound up, uncomfortable in your own skin, unable to relax state. Well, a homeopath could use a version of coffee made in small doses to further stimulate the body to switch off that nervous system and antagonized state. I liked the word antagonized because in a way, it is a dose of the very problem that the person has. That is what homeopathy is. It's a natural phenomenon.
Diluted.
Yeah, it was discovered that you could dilute the medicine and still elicit a response to the person who is sensitive to that substance. This is why homeopathy is very hard to research, because you can't give the same medicine for arthritis of the knees, let's say, to 100 people, because they probably need 40 different medicines for that 100 different people, because they are different. One person, their arthritis feels better when they put hot on it. The other person likes the arthritis with a cold application. The other person is better when they move a lot. The next person just can't move at all without a lot of pain. So every person's symptoms are different, which means the disease picture is different, which means in homeopathy, the remedy is different for those different pictures. That's why you can't do certain types of research. You can do a lot of outcome studies. Certain diseases lend themselves very well to homeopathy. So chaga is an infestation and a skin infection. That is very common. The symptoms are very common. So the remedy is very similar for most of the people who need it. That can be researched. So it's a different sort of approach to medicine.
So then, like the conventional medicine approach would be having a symptom and then prescribing based on the symptom, similar medical treatment to different people.
So let's take the example of arthritis. In simple terms, we use an anti-inflammatory. Paracetamol. You can give 30 people with arthritis paracetamol. Probably 29 of those would feel a relief because the paracetamol affects the inflammatory process in the body.
But is this a causal treatment or just a reduction in symptoms?
That's a reduction in symptoms. It doesn't treat the cause of the arthritis. And this is the dilemma for people with chronic disease. They're looking really for both management of their symptoms, and that's why they run to the pharmacy, or they're looking for treatment of the cause of the symptoms. And that's really the most important element. What is the cause? What was the initiating provocation? What caused the symptoms to appear and remain? What deficiency in the function of the body was unable to fully resolve the problem at the onset? And so that's what a homeopath is really trying to achieve, is to motivate the body to revisit how it managed that problem. You know, we hear a lot about nowadays long COVID. So long COVID is, widespread. Is it a disease unto itself, or is it a consequence of having previous diseases? It's all a mess. It's all a muddle. And what what medicine is trying to do is isolate a cause and find a medicine for that cause to suppress the action of the body. Whereas a homeopath is trying to get the body to really finally deal with that problem.
Do you need to know the cause in order to treat the cause?
It's helpful, but you don't always. I mean, you have people with autoimmune conditions that you really don't know the cause. They get a lot of different diagnoses. Perhaps they are diagnosed with Epstein-Barr syndrome. Perhaps they're diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, etc., etc. So sometimes you can only use the timeline of the symptoms, how they came on. And it is like a puzzle sometimes. And when a person is improving, they'll often see their symptoms reverse. So the old symptoms will come back as the newer ones get better. And it's a way of peeling back time, if you like.
And from a conventional medicine perspective, this would possibly rather be a sign that the treatment is not working.
In a sense, perhaps, although smart doctors would recognize that as a natural phenomenon of a person getting better. You know, I mean, you see it in a simple infection. Let's say you have a horrible cough, and it started with a sore throat and sneezing. Well, if you give a medicine and the cough gets better, but the sore throat and the sneezing returns, you kind of know that, yeah, okay, I'm not better, but it's an improvement. And so it's a stepping stone to improving completely, to revisit the sequence of the onset of the symptoms. Yeah. I mean, it sounds all very complicated and different, but actually homeopathy is very simple. Even our conversation has sounded a little complex, and I'm trying to wind it back and make it simple.
Please, yeah.
Because it's not about the medicines. It's not. It's about the response to the medicines. And so a homeopath only needs to know certain pieces of information about the person's state of reaction in order to find a remedy that would promote a better response, a better state of reaction to the condition they have. Because it's not the medicines that do the work. They're little diluted substances. So it's not the medicine, it's the response to the medicine. Yeah.
One of the distinctions you made, I think you said something along the lines that you're a purist, like that you are practicing homeopathy in a way which is very close or the same as homeopathy brought into a methodology by its originally founders. And could you share a little bit about what, if that's the right term, what does it mean to be a purist, and what's the difference to other interpretations or adaptations of homeopathy?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So in my practice, I always looked for the ways to make the process of choosing a medicine and prescribing it fast, efficient, and reliable. And in the 80s and 90s in homeopathy, there was a big boom in critical thinking. New ideas came on board, a lot of new ideas, brilliant ideas. And they were all philosophies to help you understand what to prescribe, basically. And I studied them, I jumped on them, I tried them. But in the end, I discovered that actually all of that was not really new. It was just another concept on top of a principle that was already well-founded, well-described, and well-researched. If you think about the originators of homeopathy, they developed just a few hundred remedies in the first 100 years of its practice. And they got fantastic results. Absolutely fantastic results. And yet, human nature, I think, pursued new ideas, new remedies, new philosophies, And that was all well and good. And there is a place for that. I'm not decrying it entirely. But for my practice, where I can only afford minutes sometimes in order to prescribe a medicine, I need an efficient and reliable methodology. And I found that in the originators of homeopathy. So the founders of homeopathy are really amazing to know about. The history is just fascinating. So the main founder is Samuel Hahnemann, German.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, multilingual, honored scientist, honored medical doctor, the king's physician. He was actually translating medical texts into several languages. And he wanted to understand why a certain plant was so effective for the treating of malaria. Malaria was epidemic because of the travels in the 17th century. And it was treated with a plant, a bark of a tree called cinchona. And there are actually photos of cinchona plantations around the world because it was so effective at treating malaria. And it's actually a main component of cinchona is quinine, which is still used today. Hydroxyquinine is a form of that. Anyway, he couldn't understand why it was working, so he decided to take it himself. He took drops of it, the tincture of it, and lo and behold, after an amount of it, he developed similar symptoms to malaria. And this was a eureka moment for him. And then he and a team of his colleagues, doctors and even family members, spent years studying the true medicinal effects of medicines that were in use at that time. Everything from mercury to the arsenic and all of the minerals, etc., etc., etc. And he came up with many dozens of remedies and defined their use. However, dosing in crude form became toxic to the patients. So he learned to dilute. And in fact, he was measuring the effects of those medicines on patients and learned to dilute even more, and even more, and even more. And it's only now through spectrometry and magnetic resonance and all of these technical machines that actually those little sugar pills that are medicated with a remedy that is diluted parts per billion, those parts per billion can actually be measured now. So it's not nothing. It's just highly dilute, and we have a hard time with that. However, for 275 years, homeopathy has been practiced, and it's not from some dogma and belief system that people use it. It's because it works, and you can see that. One of the things Samuel Hahnemann wrote in his treatise on homeopathy was just, please repeat my experiments. And that's all a scientist has to do to see the phenomena. And a very famous, another German homeopath who moved to the United States in the mid-1800s, Constantine Herring. He's my hero. He's fantastic. He was actually hired to write against Samuel Hahnemann to prove that his stuff was nonsense. And he read that line, just please repeat my experiments. He did. And he became one of our most important homeopaths. And so homeopathy's got a lovely history. I love the history. And more so, I love the fact that those researchers that first took those medicines wrote the effects of them so precisely that that data is still in use today. And in fact, that data is so reliable because perhaps they were free of chronic disease or had less of it than our current population.
Wow, interesting. So is it then that from the beginning of homeopathy, nothing really changed other than maybe having more remedies?
Yeah, exactly. So if I go back to the books that I use now, they probably have a couple of hundred remedies, 250. The most recent book has 3,600 remedies. And that is not manageable. Even 100 remedies, I can't remember all the details of those remedies. No one could. Maybe some photographic memory, but 3,600. And I think that it makes homeopathy harder to practice when there are too many tools. You know, it's you end up developing preferred tools and those you're more familiar with, and you miss what really could be helpful for the patient. And in fact, one of the things that homeopaths should never do is infer or assume a state of reaction. We can only use empirically what is really true about that patient. So, for example, arnica is one of the most popular homeopathic remedies. Why? Because it's for accidents, the effects of accidents, whether it's the bruising, but more importantly, it's the state of shock that you are in after a bad fall or a car accident, etc. And that's why arnica works so well, because that's so normal for people who have an accident to go into a little shock, to have a bruise, soreness, stiffness. That's why arnica is so popular, because it treats a common illness very easily.
Maybe I totally got that wrong, but the picture I have that the medicine is the cause of the disease, so you use the medicine to treat the cause, to reestablish.
So what are we treating?
Balance. How is the connection between arnica and having an
Because
accident?
if you
what's
take a lot of arnica,
connection?
you go into a sort of stupor where you're in a almost like a shock state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it can actually thin the blood enough that you have bruising.
Okay.
So it can cause those symptoms.
So overconsumption of arnica would
but
cause
you would
similar.
never do that, because it would be like eating a bath full of arnica to cause that. You might do it to rats, but not to people necessarily. But the thing is, you can elicit that symptom by taking doses over a period of time. Yeah. And arnica also has been used botanically for millennia by herbalists, by our, tribes people, druids, etc., medicine women, etc. So it's well known for treating certain things. However, homeopathically, it's even more profound when you can switch so quickly from being in a state of shock and a pro-inflammatory state to switching that off. You're just going to go back to normal.
And so the reaction or reactivating of the body's response, that can be immediate.
It can, very fast. So another one is St. John's wort, Hypericum perfoliatum, is a nervine in botanical medicine. People take it to calm their nerves. And homeopathy is to treat nerves. So if you ever slammed a hammer on your hand and smashed your finger and that pain, well, Hypericum will treat that pain almost immediately. And as the circulation improves, the symptom might return a little bit. And as it returns, you take another dose. People go for dental work and don't take injections using Hypericum because it's so effective at switching down the pain response in the nerve.
So is the effectiveness of homeopathy only dependent on or restricted to the time window that you have in terms of
good question. So acute
coming back to balance? I might not be phrasing that question really intelligently, but What are situations when homeopathy doesn't work, or does it always work, but the time window might be too short to have the time to be able to come back to balance?
So as a homeopath, you want to think of yourself as being an effective prescriber, reliable, choosing medicines that would work. Acute symptoms like an injury, an accident,
or the parasites of
cough.
Amana.
Well, that was more chronic actually, but because he had it longer than maybe 3-4 weeks, probably since birth. So, or very soon after. No, the acute and the chronic is not the issue, whether remedies will work or not. What is the issue is choosing a remedy that does antagonize the body to behave differently. So had Ramana had a successful remedy prescription, his body's immune system would have been able to push out the parasites. Maybe the pathology was just too strong. Maybe there were just too many.
So there can be a point where my body is too far from balance.
That's right.
And homeopathy might not be sufficient to bring me back.
For sure. That absolutely. And it would be wrong for a homeopath to insist, oh, no, you cannot do a drug. You need to function. You need to repair certain tissues. You need to eliminate certain pathologies. However, would you want to be on those drugs for the long time? No, you want to be in a position where you use it to your advantage and then move to the question of why is your body not healthy on its own?
So given enough time, everything is reversible? Like
some homeopaths claim to treat what are so-called irreversible diseases. There are more challenging diseases. When you think of neurological diseases like Parkinson's, MS, muscular sclerosis, dementia, and so on, I think you can affect positively very, very easily with homeopathy. But to see it turn around and repair itself completely, there's a point at which I believe the pathology is too great. And that's an acceptance of the fact that we are in a limited form. We aren't going to live forever. So perhaps the diseases we will succumb to, or that will burden us enough to precipitate our dying, maybe they are natural in that sense. However, the suffering is the important part. Are you functional? And that's the difference, perhaps, between using homeopathy and pharmacological medicine, is that when you take a beta blocker for a heart condition, you are unsettling the balance of the body. You might make the heart beat quite well. You might clear the arteries with a stent and a statin medication that things are functioning well enough. However, you're going to see other symptoms manifest as a result of the impedance of the function of the body from those medications. And that's why you see any drug, it has side effects. It's not a question of you might get side effects. You will get those side effects if you keep taking that medicine.
Suppressing, taking care of the symptoms, but you're suppressing the dynamics so it comes out in another way.
In a very simple way, yes, that's certainly true. Yeah. However, it's a pathological choice. How is the pathology progressing? So if people were treating cancer, for me, it's one of the difficult conditions to treat, not because it's not treatable, but because I can't follow the progress. A skin cancer, I can see the change, no problem. But an internal tumor, I have to rely on the medical establishments to do the tests that would show whether there's improvement or not. So in treating internal cancers, I find that is very difficult for that reason of measuring. And then secondly, time. You can't let a cancer that could benefit from a surgery progress. So it's a lot of balancing of what is the most pragmatic and logical choice for the patient. Their choice primarily. And as a homeopath, I'm usually not the primary care provider. It's usually someone else. So I'm an assistant in a way. And that's a good position to be in because I can raise questions. So a recent client, I call them clients and patients, but they called because they were having a very bad time with their Parkinson's symptoms. And looking back at the timeline, they had started a sleeping medication in order to help them sleep. So I had to question, well, it's exactly the same time that you started the medicine, that you started this new symptom that was a debilitating neurological faintness almost. So I couldn't say stop that medicine. I said, you need to ask your doctor, is it possible to switch that sleeping medication for another family of drugs to see if that is what is causing this new symptom? Because this new symptom is much worse than not sleeping. So there's a lot of delicacy in managing chronic disease, especially. So at the same time, the patient got a new remedy, and hopefully that would be something that will help them. Yeah.
The true meaning of healing is becoming whole again. And let me tell you, who you truly are is whole already. You might not be aware of that, and that's the downside of subscribing overly to fixing yourself modalities, because you might never make the realization of you being whole already, and that you fundamentally don't need any fixing. And if that's something you want to recognize for yourself, then join my workshop, The Art of Creating, where we not only dive deep into recognizing who you are, but also realizing and experiencing your fundamental wholeness. And that's really the only thing you're really looking for. Everything else is just facade. It's about coming home to yourself. And that's not a function of changing circumstances, more fixing or outside help, but it's about becoming aware of what's true and what isn't. So start your transformation now. Another question that I would love to hear your take on. Is it possible to say on what level the medicine works? Is it a vibration which enters the body holistically? There's concepts such as the physical body, mental body, emotional body, etherical body. Are those just like concepts, or is there a specific domain where the medicine enters, or does that make any sense to attribute that to some kind of local place?
In theory, you should. So the question is there a mechanism of explanation for the effect of a homeopathic remedy? So on what level is a homeopathic remedy affecting the person taking it who has a response? Some would say it's like a nanoparticle because it's highly diluted. And others, the one I like, is this subatomic understanding that this medicine is affecting on an atomic level our body's cells, our body's atoms. It's a very powerful idea, and there's a very famous homeopath called George Vitoukas who writes about that theory, and more eloquently than I just read the article and thought, wow, that is great. Because actually there is this element of what is actually happening when we take these medicines that are so small and yet have oftentimes a very profound effect. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a local effect, but a more general, holistic impact.
Yeah.
Of the medicine.
What's becoming really popular in homeopathy right now is gardening, with using remedies to support your garden, your plants, your soil. And what's interesting about plants is they're very simplistic expression of their illness. They have a parasite, they have a shock from cold or being cut, or this is very simple. And yet there's some real subtleties to how we would choose the medicine. But when you think of soil and soil health, how do you communicate that to a large terrain? And it's the mycelium that responds. But how do they respond to these microdoses? So it's a very powerful idea that you can affect the soil. And for any gardener, there's a remedy called Silicia terra, which is silica. Homeopathically, put it in a cup of water and then put that in a sprayer, a larger, and spray your soil and see the improvement to the health of the soil, those microbes, how they respond and come really take over the soil. Then you could probably, sink your hand into it afterwards. That's an exaggeration, but yeah, healthy soil is very light and porous. So it holds water.
Same medicine for humans and for soil, or?
Yeah, in fact, in silica, in a kind of idea of it, is often for our faulty growth, where our hair is brittle, our nails are brittle, our skin is imperfect. And in fact, herbally, you can buy silica, but homeopathically, it's just more powerful. But I don't really think of remedies like that anymore. How I prescribe remedies is now understanding more precisely the state of reaction to the disease that the person has, the imbalance they have, the ineffective immune response is a disease. Autoimmune is a disease where your own immune system is attacking your body. That's what's going on with arthritis. That's what's going on with chronic pain. All of the neurological conditions are being attacked by your own nervous system. There's no bug eating away at you. It's your own bugs, your own white blood, your own T helper cells, and so on. They are causing the damage. And why are they doing that? And how can we persuade them to behave better? One of the examples I give, actually, because you love dogs, is that a remedy is like a dog treat, but for bad behavior, not for good behavior. So we take a remedy when the body is not behaving properly. And that remedy, if we know it to be working for that problem, is going to improve the behavior again. So it's logical. It's logical. If you had a headache and you're taking paracetamol for the headache, you wouldn't take it for 6 months. You take it when you need it. And the remedy, a homeopathic remedy, is the same. And that way you can tell when your body is needing the remedy and when it's cruising and doing well. Yeah.
Fascinating, Jonathan.
Okay, good. I'm glad you've enjoyed that, because I feel as though I have made homeopathy much more complicated when really it isn't. When you learn the language of what a homeopath uses to prescribe their medicines, it's so simple. And that data that they are using for those symptoms has been proven for hundreds of years already. And you can find a very reliable remedy, even as a beginner homeopath, a very reliable remedy. And the one mistake homeopaths beginning make is to describe the remedy according to the disease name. So a cough, I'm going to give a remedy for that cough. And Googling or using ChatGPT, cough at night. You'll get 5 or 6 remedies that might work for that, but it's not as reliable. You might get very lucky and get 50% correct of those prescriptions. However, as a homeopath, you need to be much better than that. You cannot survive as a homeopath unless you're being 70, 80% successful. If you're not being 70 or 80% successful with your patients, you're not going to survive. No government is going to pay a homeopath to give remedies. There's too much power in the money of medicine. That's a whole other subject. Much too much power. What homeopathy does so well is give the power to you to manage your own health. And, it might sound as if I take remedies all the time. I don't. I haven't taken a remedy in months. And, I know my health is not perfect, but I'll have to wait until it's really out of balance to know what to take to restore it.
So there's really also an awareness and sensitivity to what's going on within you. And then you might...
Yeah, some people might say, don't treat yourself. Like, probably wise words. Yeah. But in a sense, if you know those remedies that help you for certain conditions, you could manage that yourself. Yeah. And in acute situations, if I got a cough, a cold, a headache, whatever, from the flu, I would manage that. Most of us are getting sick from treating diseases that are common and easily treated with inappropriate medicines. Many people are eating foods that are making them sick. Many people are living lifestyles that are making them sick. So it's not just a medicine that has to change. The person's volition and need to be healthy has to change as well.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for the time. And maybe you want to share a few words about Homeopathy Simplified. You have an online course.
I do. I'm launching a new course, homeopathysimplified.com. You sign up for the newsletter, you'll get information about it. Check it out. It's going to be a course that is really for people who want to learn how to do homeopathy, either for themselves, their family, or for their patients. And the lessons are designed to take you on a journey of learning that will create a foundation for practicing reliably. So it's a wonderful course, and I'm very excited about it. So homeopathysimplified.com. Thank you for the plug.
Amazing. Yeah, so link is in the description to this conversation. That's it. Thank you.
Welcome,
Jonathan, for taking the time to share your wisdom, and sweating with us in the Mexican heat. And thank you very much to all of you being here with us, open, curious, following the conversation. Stay true to yourself and see you next time.